Right now, growing quietly along your fence line, pushing up through the cracks in the driveway, spreading across the back corner of the lawn. There are plants most people spend their weekends pulling out and throwing away. And here is what almost nobody realizes. Several of those so-called weeds have been used for centuries to calm the kind of deep aching joint stiffness that makes getting out of bed feel like a negotiation. This video covers 10 of the most common ones, plants already growing in yards across America, and what the research and the old herbal traditions say about why they work. Stay through to number 6, because that one surprises almost everyone who sees it. So plant 1, stinging nettle. There is something almost poetic about the fact that one of nature's most effective plants for joint comfort is also one of the ones most people leap away from on first contact. Stinging nettle grows in rich, moist soil, along stream banks, at the edges of gardens, in the shadowy corners of yards where the ground stays damp. The leaves are serrated, deeply veined, and covered in fine, hollow hairs that deliver a sharp sting on contact with bare skin. Most people treat it as a hazard. Traditional herbal practitioners across Europe and North America treated it as pure gold. The research behind nettle's reputation is more substantial than many plant remedies. The plant contains powerful compounds including polyphenols, carotenoids, and lectins that work naturally to soothe the body's tissues. Studies looking at structural health have found it may help maintain a balanced, comfortable tissue environment throughout the system. One compound in particular, found in the root extract, has generated immense interest among researchers for its ability to support full-body comfort through a remarkably gentle, natural mechanism. Growing stinging nettle in your yard requires almost no effort. It spreads readily and prefers a partly shaded spot with consistently moist soil. A patch along a fence or near a downspout works well. Gardeners who want to contain it can grow it in a large pot sunk into the ground. Harvesting requires gloves, thick gardening gloves, not thin ones, and scissors. The young top leaves are the most versatile. Once dried or cooked, the sting disappears entirely. The most traditional preparation is nettle tea. Dried leaves steeped in hot water for 10 to 15 minutes produce a deep green earthy brew that has been drunk for joint support for generations. The fresh young leaves can also be cooked like spinach, wilted in a pan with a little olive oil and garlic, which neutralizes the sting and creates something surprisingly mild and nourishing. Nettle soup is still enjoyed regularly in parts of Europe, not as a novelty but as a timeless seasonal tradition. For those who want to skip the kitchen entirely, nettle is widely available as a dried tea or whole herb capsule at health food stores. Plant 2, plantain broadleaf, not the tropical fruit, the humble lawn weed. Broadleaf plantain, known botanically as Plantago major, is one of the most widely distributed plants on Earth. It followed human civilization across North America so persistently that some indigenous peoples called it white man's footprint. Today it grows in lawns, along driveways, at the edges of garden beds, in compacted soil that most plants refuse. It is flat, low-growing, with wide oval leaves and distinctive parallel veins running lengthwise. Most people mow right over it without a second thought. Plantain has a legendary history of use as a topical comfort plant. Pressed leaves applied to bug stings, minor scrapes, and surface irritations. But its internal use for full-body comfort has a quieter, equally deep tradition. The leaves contain active compounds called iridoides, including aucubin, along with protective flavonoids and natural tannins. Research has highlighted the impressive protective properties found in plantain extracts, suggesting the plant helps soothe localized tissue. For joint comfort specifically, it has been used historically both as an herbal tea drunk daily and as a warm poultice applied directly to stiff, uncomfortable joints. Harvesting plantain from the yard is exceptionally straightforward. The key is choosing leaves from clean areas that have not been treated with herbicides or lawn chemicals. Something to think about carefully before harvesting any yard plant for internal use. Young leaves are the most tender and least bitter. They can be eaten raw in salads, wilted into cooked dishes, or dried for tea. The dried leaf tea is mild, slightly grassy, and easy to drink daily. For a topical approach, fresh leaves can be crushed or briefly warmed and applied directly as a compress to swollen, aching joints. It is old-fashioned, unglamorous, and according to traditional practices, remarkably effective. Plantain is also one of the easiest plants to identify with confidence, which matters for anyone new to foraging from the yard. The parallel leaf veins are distinctive and hard to confuse with anything harmful. A hand lens or even a phone camera macro shot makes identification simple. Plant 3. Chickweed. Chickweed is so small and soft that most people walk right past it if they notice it at all. It grows low to the ground in dense mats, with tiny oval leaves and miniature white flowers that look like they belong in a fairy garden. It loves cool, moist conditions and is one of the first plants to appear in early spring. In mild zones, it may grow nearly year-round. It appears in vegetable gardens, flower beds, shaded lawn patches, and along the bases of walls, anywhere the soil is fertile and the sun is gentle. Chickweed has been used for centuries as a cooling, soothing plant, both topically for minor skin irritation and internally as a highly nutritive green. It is genuinely nutrient-dense, containing vitamin C, iron, and calcium at excellent levels. For joint comfort, the relevant compounds include saponins and flavonoids with documented tissue-soothing properties. Traditional herbalists reached for chickweed for conditions characterized by excess heat and discomfort, the swollen, hot-to-the-touch joint tension of seasonal flares being one of the classic uses. A chickweed poultice or chickweed-infused oil applied topically to a stiff joint has a deep history in early American traditions. Growing chickweed requires essentially no effort. It grows itself. In a garden setting, it functions as a brilliant living mulch, keeping moisture in the soil and naturally suppressing other weeds. The challenge is not growing it, but keeping it from spreading too aggressively. Harvesting is done by snipping the tender top growth with scissors, which also keeps the plant tidy. Fresh chickweed can be eaten in salads, featuring a mild, slightly grassy flavor that pairs well with stronger greens. It can be juiced, made into tea, or simmered gently and applied as a warm compress directly to uncomfortable joints. Chickweed-infused oil is made by packing fresh, slightly wilted plant material into a glass jar, covering it with olive oil, and allowing it to infuse for several weeks in a warm spot before straining. Plant 4. Clover. Clover is so embedded in the American lawn that it was deliberately included in grass seed mixes for decades, until the rise of broadleaf herbicides made it collateral damage. Now it is making a quiet comeback as more gardeners recognize what it actually does. Fixes nitrogen in the soil, feeds pollinators, and as it turns out, carries compounds with real relevance to tissue health and joint comfort. Both red clover and white clover are common across the United States. Red clover grows slightly taller, with larger pink-purple flower heads. White clover stays lower, with smaller white blooms and leaves marked with a distinctive pale chevron. Red clover has attracted the most scientific attention, largely because of its isoflavonostric content, plant compounds that interact beautifully with the body's natural chemistry and have been studied for their effects on bone density and cardiovascular support. For structural comfort, some research suggests red clover extracts may help maintain a balanced, healthy baseline throughout the skeletal system. White clover also contains flavonoids and other polyphenols with excellent protective properties, though it has been studied less extensively. Both types of clover grow easily without any intentional cultivation. The challenge is usually having too much rather than too little. For those who want to encourage a particular patch, simply avoiding herbicide use in that area is sufficient. The flowers are the most potent part of the plant for traditional use, and are also the most pleasant to work with. Red clover flowers dried and made into tea produce a mild, slightly sweet, pleasant-tasting brew that has been drunk as a daily tonic for generations. The flowers can also be eaten fresh in salads, added to herbal infusion blends, or dried and stored for winter use. White clover flowers are similarly edible and similarly mild. Plant 5. Purslane. Purslane is one of those plants that took the Western world a long time to catch up with. In much of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Asia, it has been enjoyed as a delicious vegetable and used as a staple of wellness for thousands of years. In American yards, it is usually treated as a nuisance, a fleshy, low-growing succulent with thick reddish stems and paddle-shaped leaves that spreads readily in hot weather and seems to reappear no matter how many times it is pulled. That resilience is part of what makes it so uniquely dense. Purslane contains more omega-3 fatty acids than any other leafy plant ever measured, more than some cold water fish, ounce for ounce. It also contains vitamins A, C, and E, along with magnesium and potassium. For joint comfort, the omega-3 content is an absolute game changer. Omega-3 fatty acids are well established as structural building blocks that help keep the body in a balanced, healthy state, naturally easing stiffness and localized tension. Most people in the modern lifestyle run low on these critical fats, making the inclusion of a regular plant-based source like purslane a highly meaningful dietary choice. The plant also contains *betalan pigments, the same vibrant pigments that give beets their rich color, which carry their own impressive protective properties. Purslane appears in gardens in late spring through summer, preferring warm soil and full sun. It is incredibly easy to identify. The fleshy stems, the smooth paddle leaves, and the reddish-green coloring are unmistakable. It grows close to the ground in a spreading mat. Harvesting the tender top growth and young stems gives the mildest flavor. Purslane has a slightly tangy, lemony taste and a satisfying crunch. It works beautifully in fresh salads, adds texture to grain bowls, can be pickled, lightly sautéed, or added to savory stews at the end of cooking. In Turkey, it is mixed with yogurt and garlic into a traditional dip. For those who want the benefits without the kitchen work, purslane can simply be rinsed and eaten fresh as a daily handful. There are 5 more plants coming, and number 6 is one that most people have yanked out of their yard 100 times, never knowing what they were throwing away. But before getting there, if this kind of practical, natural health information is useful, consider subscribing to Backyard Wellness Gardening. New videos go up every week, and every one of them is built around plants that are accessible, familiar, and backed by real tradition and real research. The subscribe button is right below this video. Plant 6. Goldenrod. Almost every fall, goldenrod gets blamed for seasonal sneezing and watery eyes. It is one of the most persistent cases of mistaken botanical identity in North America. The real culprit is ragweed, which blooms at the same time and releases its pollen invisibly into the air. Goldenrod's pollen is heavy and sticky, carried safely by insects, not the wind, and poses almost no allergenic risk. The confusion persists simply because goldenrod is so visible, lighting up roadsides and fields with its tall plumes of bright yellow flowers at exactly the time ragweed is doing its invisible damage in the background. Goldenrod has a powerful tradition in North American and European herbal practices, particularly for its soothing effects on the body's tissues and urinary pathways. The plant contains flavonoids, saponins, and phenolic acids that have demonstrated excellent antioxidant and tissue-soothing activity in research. European regulatory bodies have formally recognized traditional goldenrod preparations for systemic support. For joint comfort, goldenrod has been used in traditional practice as an evening tea drunk regularly over time, a tonic approach aimed at reducing the underlying tissue burden that contributes to chronic stiffness. Goldenrod grows beautifully along roadsides, at the edges of fields, and at the backs of lawns where the grass gives way to something wilder. It can reach 3 to 5 feet tall, with arching plumes of tiny yellow flowers from late summer into fall. Growing it intentionally is easy. It is widely available at native plant nurseries and thrives with almost no care once established. It spreads via rhizomes, so giving it a defined space is wise. The flowers and upper leaves are the parts used traditionally. Dried goldenrod tea has a pleasant, slightly floral, mildly complex taste. It can be blended with other herbs like clover and nettle for a superb daily anti-inflammatory infusion. Plant 7. Wild violet. Wild violet is the kind of weed that makes lawn perfectionists frustrated and everyone else quietly charmed. It appears in early spring, often before the grass has fully woken up, with heart-shaped leaves and delicate purple flowers that seem almost too pretty to belong in an untended lawn. It grows in partly shaded areas, spreads steadily via underground rhizomes, and is nearly impossible to eradicate once established, which, from a wellness perspective, is fantastic. Wild violet is one of the most nutritionally rich plants growing in your lawn. The leaves contain extraordinary levels of vitamins, reportedly higher than oranges by weight, along with vitamin A and a range of protective flavonoids, including rutin. Rutin is a bioflavonoid with documented protective properties and has been investigated for its potential role in supporting blood vessel integrity and overall joint comfort. The flowers have an equally deep history of use as a nutritive, soothing remedy. Wild violet has been used in folk medicine traditions across North America and Europe as a gentle daily tonic, enjoyed as food just as much as an herbal extraction. Identifying wild violet with confidence is straightforward. The heart-shaped leaves with scalloped edges and the distinctive purple flowers are hard to mistake. The entire above-ground plant is edible and pleasant tasting. Young leaves and flowers can be added to salads, where they add vibrant color and a mild green flavor. The flowers can be steeped into a traditional syrup or simply eaten fresh. Violet leaf tea is exceptionally mild and comforting. For those managing chronic joint stiffness, incorporating wild violet as a regular edible green, a simple handful in a daily salad, is one of the easiest possible lifestyle choices. Plant 8. Lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters has been enjoyed by humans for thousands of years and dismissed as a garden weed for the last 100. It grows fast and tall, sometimes reaching 5 or 6 feet by midsummer, and appears reliably in disturbed soil, garden beds, the edges of paths, and anywhere the ground has been recently turned. The leaves are distinctive. A dusty, mealy coating on the undersides gives them a pale, silvery blue look that sets them apart from other weeds. Young plants are most tender and most useful. By midsummer, the older leaves become tougher and more strongly flavored. Nutritionally, lamb's quarters rival spinach, and some analyses show it to be structurally superior. It is high in vitamins A, C, and K, along with calcium, iron, and clean protein. For joint health, the relevant compounds include exceptional levels of antioxidants and tissue-soothing flavonoids. Chronic joint discomfort is often associated with localized oxidative stress, a state where free radicals challenge the body's natural defenses. Plants rich in antioxidants help balance that internal environment. Lamb's quarters, enjoyed regularly as a cooked green or used as a tea, represents a massive addition to an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, especially for individuals whose vegetable choices have become limited. Growing lamb's quarters is not something most gardeners need to do intentionally. It will appear on its own wherever conditions are right. The skill is learning to recognize it before pulling it, treating it as a crop rather than a weed. Young plants can be harvested by cutting the top 6 inches, which encourages the plant to branch and produce more tender growth. The leaves cook exactly like spinach, wilting quickly in a hot pan, reducing in volume and becoming mild and tender in minutes. They can be used in any recipe calling for cooked greens, stirred into farm-fresh eggs, folded into grain dishes, added to soups, or simply sautéed with garlic and olive oil. The flavor is wonderfully mild and earthy. Plant 9. Yarrow. Yarrow is one of the oldest medicinal plants in recorded human history. Archaeological evidence suggests it was utilized thousands of years ago within ancient burial sites, pointing to a legendary relationship with mankind. It appears prominently across classical Greece, European folk medicine, and indigenous North American traditions. Today it grows beautifully along roadsides, in meadows, and at the dry edges of lawns. A flat-topped cluster of tiny white or pale pink flowers on ferny aromatic foliage that spreads steadily once established. Yarrow's traditional uses are broad, but its tissue-soothing and circulatory effects are among the most documented. The plant contains active flavonoids including *apigenin and *luteolanist, both of which have been studied heavily for their calming properties. It also contains biological sesquiterpene lactones. In traditional herbal practice, yarrow was used for joint comfort in 2 ways: internally as a tea to support systemic circulation, and externally as a strong compress applied directly to stiff, aching areas. Improved circulation is deeply relevant because stiff joints often suffer from poor local blood flow, particularly during colder weather. Yarrow is widely available at garden centers as a resilient perennial, serving double duty as a gorgeous landscape asset and a traditional herb. It prefers full sun and well-drained soil, tolerates drought once established, and comes back reliably each year. The flowers are harvested when fully open and dried quickly to preserve their color. Yarrow tea has a distinctive herbal aroma and a pleasantly complex, mildly bitter taste. It is traditionally blended with elderflower or peppermint. For topical use, a strong yarrow infusion cooled to a comfortable temperature and applied with a cloth compress to a stiff joint is a traditional routine with a flawless, safe track record. Say Plant 10. Wood sorrel. Wood sorrel is one of those plants that children discover before adults do. The small clover-like leaves, 3 heart-shaped leaflets on a thin stem, have a bright lemony sourness. When chewed, that is immediately surprising and distinctive. It grows in shaded spots under trees, along the bases of garden fences, and in the gaps of stone paths. In mild climates, it grows nearly year-round. It is often mistaken for clover, but the heart-shaped leaflets and the immediate sour flavor distinguish it instantly. Several species grow across North America, sharing the same properties. The sour flavor comes from natural oxalic acid, the same compound that makes rhubarb tart. In normal culinary amounts, oxalic acid is well tolerated by healthy systems. For joint health, the relevant compounds include vitamin C. Wood sorrel is notably high in it, and protective flavonoids including vitexin. Vitamin C plays a direct physical role in joint health. It is absolutely essential for collagenous synthesis, the protein that forms the structural matrix of cartilage and connective tissue. Chronic joint discomfort is in part a story of tissue breakdown over time, and vitamin C is one of the fundamental building blocks the body needs to maintain and renew that structural matrix. Wood sorrel can be harvested in small quantities throughout the growing season. The leaves, stems, and small flowers are all entirely edible. A small handful added to a green salad brightens the whole dish without any dressing needed. Because of its oxalic acid content, it is best used in moderation as a delightful flavor accent, but as a regular small addition to your daily meals, it is a genuinely useful and refreshing plant. 10 plants. All of them are growing right now in yards, lawns, and gardens across this country. Not in specialty stores, not requiring expensive setups. Just there, in the corner of the yard, along the fence, pushing up through the path, quietly carrying natural compounds that humans have been turning to for joint comfort for centuries. The remarkable thing about this list is not any single plant, it is the asterisk pattern. Every one of these weeds contains protective, tissue-soothing compounds. Every one of them has a deep tradition of use for stiffness that predates modern laboratories by generations. The old herbalists did not have modern clinical trials, but they had something else. Accumulated observation across millions of people over hundreds of years. That kind of consensus is worth taking seriously. Start with 1. Plantain tea for a week. A handful of purslane in a daily salad. A patch of nettle dried and kept in a jar by the kettle. Small, consistent additions to daily life that build over time into something beautiful. Your backyard is not just a lawn to maintain, it is a sanctuary that tends itself. If this video was useful, click the subscribe button now. There is a full library of backyard wellness gardening episodes covering plants, foods, and natural approaches to the health concerns that matter most. Thank you for staying till the end. See you in the next one.